Dust motes danced in the pale sunlight that sliced through boarded windows. John, weathered face creased with years of solitude, stirred. A sound, faint yet sharp, cut through the silence that had been his only companion for how long? A knock at the door. He hadn't heard that sound in years. His heart pounded. No one. There couldn't be anyone. He was the last man on earth. The thought echoed in the cavernous emptiness of the house, a chilling reminder of his reality. Yet the knock came again, insistent, demanding. He had searched desperately in the early days, scoured every town, every city, every continent. Empty. The silence was the most terrifying thing he had ever encountered. The silence of a world devoid of laughter, of music, of the comforting hum of human life. Just silence, broken only by the wind whistling through the ruins of a civilization that was no more. Now, holed up in this small town, surviving on canned goods and the ghosts of memories, he had resigned himself to his fate, the last echo of humanity, fading into the abyss of time. But the knock promised something different. Terror and a sliver of hope warred within him. He crept towards the door, each step a monumental effort against the weight of his solitude. Peeking through the grimy peephole, he saw nothing, just the deepening shadows of the approaching night. His heart hammered against his ribs, a drumbeat of primal fear. As he reached for the doorknob, a cold gust of wind slammed the door open. He gasped, stumbling back. Framed in the doorway, a fleeting image, a face pale and gaunt, eyes burning with an eerie light. Then just as quickly, it was gone. He slammed the door shut, his breath catching in his throat. His blood ran cold. He had seen enough death to know its face, but this was different. This was not the peace of oblivion. This was something else, something that lingered. The wind howled outside, carrying with it whispers and moans that seemed to claw at the edges of his sanity. His mind conjured images of shadowy figures, their forms shifting and swirling in the darkness. He was alone, yet he felt surrounded, hunted by something he couldn't see, couldn't comprehend. Days blurred into nights, each one a terrifying echo of the last. The knock, the fleeting glimpse of the spectral face, the whispers in the wind, a relentless cycle that chipped away at his sanity, his grip on reality. He was trapped, not only in his solitary existence, but in this terrifying loop of events. He tried to rationalize it. Hallucinations, sleep deprivation, the echoes of a world that was no more. But deep down, he knew this was real. This was his new reality. A horrifying existence where he was condemned to relive the same terrifying moments for eternity. Gap 3S. John's mind raced as he tried to comprehend the endless loop he was trapped in. He began to question his own sanity, wondering if he was truly the last man on Earth or if this was some cruel trick of the universe. The knock, the face, the whispers. They all seemed to be fragments of a larger puzzle he couldn't piece together. He decided to venture out to find answers, even if it meant facing the unknown horrors that awaited him. Gap 2S. He packed a small bag, taking only the essentials, and stepped out into the desolate world beyond his door. The silence was deafening, the emptiness overwhelming. Every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind carried a whisper of the vanished. He walked for hours, days, losing track of time in the endless expanse of nothingness. Gap 2S. As he ventured deeper into the unknown, he stumbled upon remnants of the world that once was. Abandoned houses, empty streets, and eerie echoes of laughter that hung in the air like ghosts of a forgotten past. But there were no answers, only more questions, more pieces of the puzzle that refused to fit. Gap 2S. Just when he was about to give up hope, he saw it, a faint light in the distance, flickering like a beacon in the darkness. With renewed determination, he pressed on, drawn to the light like a moth to a flame. Little did he know, what awaited him there would change everything. Gap 3S. The light led him to an old, dilapidated building, its walls covered in strange symbols and markings. Inside, the air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. As he explored the building, he found a room filled with mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of himself, each one more twisted and tormented than the last. Gap 2S. In the center of the room stood a single ornate mirror, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. He approached it, his reflection staring back at him with a look of despair and understanding. And then the mirror spoke, its voice a chorus of whispers and echoes. "You are the key," it said. "You are the answer." Gap 3S. John's heart pounded in his chest as he reached out to touch the mirror, his fingers trembling. As soon as his hand made contact, a blinding light enveloped him, and he was pulled into the mirror, into the void beyond. He was no longer in the world he knew, but in a place where time and reality had no meaning. A place where he would finally uncover the truth behind the endless cycle, the haunting whispers, and the face in the void. Gap 2S. And with that, he took the first step into the unknown, ready to face whatever horrors awaited him, determined to break the cycle and find his way back to reality. Or perhaps to a new reality altogether. Gap 3S. The journey had just begun. Gap 3S. As he stepped out into the desolate world, the silence was deafening. Every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind carried a whisper. He walked through the ruins of what was once a bustling city, now a graveyard of memories. The knock echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of his isolation. But he pressed on, determined to find the source of his torment. Gap 2S. The streets were littered with remnants of a life long gone. Discarded toys, rusted cars, and crumbling buildings that loomed like silent sentinels. Each step he took was a journey through the ghostly echoes of a forgotten past. Gap 2S. He could almost hear the laughter of children, the chatter of busy streets, the hum of everyday life. But now those sounds were replaced by an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on his soul. Gap 2S. Suddenly he stumbled upon a park, its once lush greenery now a wasteland of overgrown weeds and decaying benches. In the center stood a statue, its features worn away by time, but its presence still commanding. He approached it, feeling a strange pull, as if the statue itself held some secret. Gap 2S. As he reached out to touch the cold stone, the whispers grew louder, more coherent. They spoke of a time before the silence, of a world that had thrived and then vanished. And then he heard it. A single, clear voice amidst the cacophony of whispers. "Find the heart," it said. "The heart of the silence." Gap 2S. With renewed determination, he continued his journey, the words echoing in his mind. He knew now that he was not just seeking answers, but the very essence of the silence that had consumed his world. And with each step, he felt himself drawing closer to the truth, to the heart of the silence that held the key to his torment. Gap 3S. The journey through the whispering ruins had given him a glimmer of hope, a sense of purpose. He was no longer just a wanderer in a desolate world. He was a seeker of truth, ready to face whatever lay ahead. And so, he pressed on, into the unknown, into the heart of the silence. Gap 3S. Days turned into weeks as John wandered the empty streets. He encountered remnants of the past, abandoned homes, rusted cars, and faded photographs. Each discovery was a painful reminder of the world that once was. But amidst the decay, he found clues. Cryptic messages scrawled on walls, symbols that seemed to point towards a hidden truth. He followed them, driven by a desperate need for answers. Gap 2S. The messages were fragmented, like pieces of a shattered mirror, reflecting a reality that was just out of reach. "The heart lies within," one message read, etched into the crumbling facade of an old library. Another, painted in bold red letters on a broken bridge, simply said, "Seek the whispers." Gap 2S. John deciphered each clue with growing urgency, piecing together a map that led him deeper into the heart of the silent city. The symbols grew more intricate, the messages more desperate. "We are the echoes," one final message declared, scrawled on the steps of a grand cathedral. Gap 2S. He pushed open the heavy doors of the cathedral, the creak of the hinges echoing through the vast empty space. The air was thick with the weight of centuries, the silence almost tangible. At the altar he found a worn book, its pages filled with the same cryptic symbols that had guided him here. Gap 2S. As he opened the book, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than ever. They spoke of a time before the silence, of a world that had thrived and then vanished. And then he heard it again. A single, clear voice amidst the cacophony of whispers. "Find the heart," it said. "The heart of the silence." Gap 2S. With the book in hand and the message clear, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew now that he was on the right path, that he was drawing closer to the truth. The cryptic trail had led him here to the heart of the silence. And with each step, he felt himself drawing closer to the answers he so desperately sought. Gap 3S. The journey through the cryptic trail had given him hope, a sense of direction. He was no longer just a wanderer in a desolate world. He was a seeker of truth, ready to face whatever lay ahead. And so, he pressed on, into the unknown, into the heart of the silence. Gap 3S. One night, as he rested in an old library, he heard the knock again. This time, it was different, softer, almost pleading. He followed the sound, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. It led him to a hidden room, filled with old books and strange artifacts. In the center of the room, a mirror stood, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. As he approached, he saw his reflection, but it was not his own. It was the face he had seen at the door, the face that had haunted him for so long. Gap 2S. The reflection moved independently, its eyes filled with sorrow and understanding. "Who are you?" John whispered, his voice trembling. The reflection's lips moved, but no sound came. Instead, the whispers filled the room, swirling around him like a storm. Gap 2S. "The heart of the silence," the whispers said, echoing the message he had seen before. "You are the key." The reflection raised its hand and John mirrored the movement, their fingers almost touching the cold surface of the glass. Gap 2S. In that moment, memories flooded his mind. Flashes of a life before the silence, a world filled with laughter and love. He saw himself, not as a wanderer, but as a man who had once been whole. The reflection's eyes pleaded with him, begging him to remember, to understand. Gap 2S. "Break the cycle," the whispers urged. "Find the heart." John felt a surge of determination, a resolve to end the torment that had plagued him for so long. He knew now that the answers lay within him, that the silence was a prison of his own making. Gap 2S. With a deep breath, he reached out and touched the mirror. The surface rippled like water, and he felt a pull, drawing him into the depths of his own mind. The room dissolved around him, and he found himself standing in a vast, empty void, face to face with his own fears and regrets. Gap 3S. He understood now that the journey was not just about finding the truth, but about confronting the darkness within himself. And as he stood there in the heart of the silence, he felt a sense of peace. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead, to break the cycle and find the final echo. The reflection spoke, its voice a whisper that echoed in the silence. "You are not alone," it said. "We are all trapped in this cycle, bound by our fears and regrets." John reached out, his hand trembling. As his fingers touched the mirror, a surge of energy coursed through him. He felt a connection, a bond with the countless souls who had faced the same torment. He realized that he was part of something larger, a collective consciousness of the lost and the damned. Gap 2S. The void around him began to shift, revealing countless faces, each one a reflection of his own pain and sorrow. They were the echoes of those who had come before him, those who had failed to break the cycle. Their whispers filled the air, a chorus of despair and longing. Gap 2S. "We are bound by the silence," they murmured. "But together we can find the heart and end it." John felt their strength, their determination merging with his own. He was not just a solitary wanderer anymore, he was part of a greater whole, united in their quest for freedom. Gap 2S. With renewed resolve, he turned back to the mirror. The reflection's eyes were filled with hope, a silent promise that the end was near. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the final step. Gap 2S. "We will break the cycle," he vowed. "Together, we will find the heart of the silence." And as he spoke those words, the void began to dissolve, revealing a path forward, a path that would lead him to the final echo and the end of his journey. Gap 3S. He stepped forward, no longer afraid, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The collective consciousness of the lost and the damned walked with him, their whispers guiding him toward the heart of the silence and the promise of a new dawn. With newfound resolve, John vowed to break the cycle. He would confront his fears, face the darkness, and find a way to free himself and the others. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers and unknowns. But he was no longer alone. He had a purpose, a mission. Gap 2S. As he stepped back into the night, the knock came again, but this time it was a call to action, a beacon of hope in the endless void. Gap 2S. John felt the whispers of the collective consciousness urging him forward, their strength bolstering his resolve. Gap 2S. "We are with you," they whispered. "Together we will find the heart of the silence." Gap 2S. He walked with determination, each step echoing with the promise of liberation, each heartbeat synchronized with the countless souls who shared his plight. Gap 2S. The shadows seemed less menacing now, transformed by the light of hope that burned within him. The path ahead was still shrouded in mystery, but John knew he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Gap 2S. The darkness was no longer an abyss of despair. It was a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of freedom and redemption. Gap 2S. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the horizon, John felt a surge of anticipation. This was the beginning of the end, the dawn of resolve that would lead him to the final echo and the ultimate truth. Gap 2S. And with the collective consciousness as his guide, he knew he would not falter. They would break the cycle. They would find the heart of the silence, and they would be free. Gap 3S. He continued forward, the knock now a rhythmic pulse that matched his own, a symphony of hope in the symphony of the night. The final echo awaited, and John was ready to meet it head-on. One night, the knock came again. But this time John didn't hesitate. He threw open the door, a primal scream escaping his lips. He was done being afraid. He lunged into the darkness, ready to confront whatever awaited him. And then he understood. He saw himself standing on the other side of the threshold, weathered and terrified, his own reflection staring back at him from the abyss. He was the ghost in his own haunting, trapped in an endless cycle of fear and despair. The last man on earth condemned to haunt himself for eternity.